get another perspective on that World War I period. In fact, the Chazon Ish we mentioned last time writes in his Sefer on Zoroim in Maseches Kelim, excuse me, not in Zoroim, in Taros, he writes like this: Shnat milchama al pnei kol haaretz. There's a time of war. Asher osu mamleches Ashkenaz v'Austria and mamleches Russia, Anglia v'Tzarfat. Them against them. V'charva yarus. Towns were destroyed. V'nerso medinot b'Moshe b'nei Yisrael. Places where Jews left were decimated. V'ravavot b'nei Yisrael. Tens of thousands of the Jewish people galu b'li mish'anu mashena, without any support, any help. V'nari b'nei Yehuda. The children of Yehuda have naflu chalom, have died. Al stei krav mizel mizeh. On both sides of the battlefield, Jews have died. Jewish young Jews have died. Umatu batei medrash, and batei medrash l'Torah be'ein tomech u'machazik. There's no one to hold up the shuls and no one to hold up the batei medrashos. Umahuma rabba b'kerev kol Yisrael. The whole Jewish people is b'mahuma, is doesn't know what to do. Stufitzi, I think that was the town he was in. Shenisrafa kimat kol ir b'yom beis. The whole town was burned on Monday. Chafei Sivan b'chol yoshveh b'lachatz u'b'dochak bein bay lagur ve'in makom lo. Have nowhere to be. That's what the Chazon Ish writes. That was the situation. Really sad. Anyway, on a nicer note, a sweeter note, if you will, the Chazon Ish, as we mentioned, was sitting in Rav Zalman's house and was a guest there, and he said that those were the best years of his life, believe it or not, because he was so shakur, so totally involved at a level. We can't go into many stories about the Chazon Ish, but everybody who knows about the Chazon Ish knows his level of shkius. There's the known stories. One story they said, I don't remember if it's from a musmach source, but it for sure sheds light on who he was. And I've heard other stories that are definitely in the same vein. And they found him one time on, I think this was already when he was in Eretz Yisrael in Bnei Brak. They found him once lying on the floor, and someone said, "What happened?" He said, "I always learn ad klot hakochot, and I learn until I have no more koach. But I always leave myself enough koach to get to my bed, and this time I misevaluated. So I learned a little bit too much, and I started walking, and I couldn't make it to the bed." It's hard to imagine someone like that, and someone, as I said, to see how he was zocha amongst achronim, to an incredible level of authoritativeness and acceptance, and all over the world of Lomdim, wherever you go. If they're learning Taurus, they have a Chazon Ish open. You have Kachim, Chazon Ish, Nezikin, not even talking about Shabbos and Erevin. Everywhere the Chazon Ish spoke, he's authoritative, which is just an enormous level for any person to reach, specifically in later generations. Okay, we can talk about him a lot. But anyway, it says that he was learning in the house, and the Sorotzkin kids would sometimes fight a little bit. And they said the Chazon Ish would would look up from his sefer, and he became like the judge, and he would decide who was right and who was wrong, and then quiet the kids down. That's what his son Rav Zalman Sorotzkin related, which is very, very sweet. Mi Hashem b'chol mikra. So now we get to what we wanted to focus on in this session, which is what was Rav Zalman doing during this time. Again, he himself was a refugee from Zetel to Minsk, and he's sitting in Minsk, and he took upon himself, and this is so typical, this first time we've mentioned this, but this is so typical from every step in his life of how he was. He took a great responsibility to help Rabbanim and others get out of the draft. There's a very real chashash. We mentioned last time the Stipler was in the actual army, the Chazon Ish going to the Russian army. I mean, who can imagine that? That specifically, couldn't imagine such things. He said he used to go to Petersburg, which was, he himself was safe personally, and I'll just say now, one of the main problems was two things: that if you Rabbanim, like priests lahavdil, had a certain clemency, but a lot of the legal issue, went around the fact that who says you're a Rav? Your town is not under Russian jurisdiction anymore, so maybe not there. Maybe there is no Zetel. There is no Slovic or whatever town it will be. There is no Petersburg now. As things go in war, and anybody knows about World War I knows they were slogging out this side and that side, and we said itself, Zetel was changing hands all the time. So listen, it says he went more than 10 times, a 10-hour train journey, and he kept going and trying to explain to the authorities that they just have to let the Rabbanim off. They are Rabbanim, even though they're not in their towns. The people still need them. They're functionaries. They're working, etc. All those types of arguments. It says there was a certain anti-Semitic, tough general named Stasovitz, which everybody's scared of, one of those Russians everybody was scared of, and you can imagine. And Rav Zalman said, I have to go speak to him. And he pushed another Dr. Luntz, who was the Yoshev Rosh of the Vad HaPlitim, who didn't even want to meet Stasovitz. Himself was scared of Stasovitz, but he pushed him, and then they made a three-way meeting. And you see two things here. One is what we've said already. His Mesiras Nefesh is pushing Nichnas, we say in Hebrew, La'ovei HaKorah, go where the problem is, go to fix things fearlessly, Mesiras Nefesh, not caring for himself. And he sat with the Stasovitz for a few good hours, and he turned him totally into a friend. There was an anti-Semitic, tough German general, anti-Semitic, tough Russian general, German, Russian, they're all, right? But, right, he was a tough anti-Semite general, and his magnetism, Rav Zalman always knew the right thing to say, and he had this magnetic personality, and he switched him around, and Rav Zalman made him basically his yoetz, his advisor on rabbinic issues. And through that, it sounds like he got tens of other Rabbanim off the hook. In fact, the Chazon Ish itself, when the final papers had to go through to release him, and they made the Chazon Ish a Rav of a town who he actually had been at a certain point, then it says Rav Zalman thought him going in his rabbinic attire wouldn't be the right thing to do. Again, he's mid-30s about this time, right? Because he's born in 1880, the war starts in 1914, so he's about 34 to 37 at this point in time. He sends his daughter Tama, who must have been less than 20, Tama, and she herself was a wonderful personality, spoke many, many languages, and she went and got the final papers that the Chazon Ish is released. And the Chazon Ish was so full of a Akaras Tov, he went out, which he never went out. He just sat there. By the way, I forgot to say before, they say rarely would he even ask about what was going on. We can't imagine his shkiyut, his total being sunken in learning. They're working for your salvation. A normal person, a normal masman, a normal gadol would ask, like, what's going on? He says he rarely even asked what was going on. He was happy just sitting and steiging. And when the papers came, he went out and he bought a Rabbi Akiva Eiger, chose Rabbi Akiva Eiger for Rav Zalman Sorotzkin, and he wrote Zalman Sorotzkin. You know how they write Zalman Sorotzkin, and each letter he wrote like something about Zion, Zalman, Zion, Mem, and Rav Zalman kept that Rabbi Akiva Eiger on his desk, even in his later years. In one of his letters, the Chazon Ish wrote to Rav Zalman something which is very telling in later years. Achar drichet Shlomo hatov v'shem taroso b'hava v'yot shanashim balei ma'asim mu'atim nenu. Those who really act, men of action, are few. V'nishtolu b'chol dor, and Hashem plays them in every generation. Interesting. That's a famous Chazal which I know that says about tzaddikim. Tanya brings that there are tzaddikim, there are few tzaddikim, and Hashem puts them in every generation. So I think the Chazon Ish is working off of that. I don't believe it's a Lashon Chazal. It might be that I don't know. But it says, Anashim what? The men of true men of action, true Askanim are few. So Hashem made sure to put them in each generation. Kfar Hero Otan Mirosh, Dor V'Dorshav, and Hashem knows who they are in each generation. Uparnasav Hinei Zacham Alas Kvot Terasa Shlita. And he's saying, of course, you're one of those people. And the Chazon Ish knew on his own basar, on his own flesh, what an Ishmas Rav Zalman was and his family, and we'll give a little bit more of that in the next session.